It's the Cavaliers Basketball Club Podcast.
It's basketball time at the cube. LeBron left to the circle, left to the lane. Gonna go all the way and hammer it home. Everybody on their feet. Sends it for three. Oh, are you kidding me? It's over. The 52-year drought is over. The Cavaliers have won the NBA championship.
We wanted to go in a different direction. We wanted a different approach.
60.
The shoot-around.
Hello, Cavs fans. As always, I'm joined by co-host Colin, and we are here to talk about a week of wins for the Cavaliers. This was well-deserved after enduring that 10-game losing streak.
Yeah, Adam, thank you for the intro. I'm excited to talk about the team's 4-game winning streak, what type of player or players the Cavs should give back in return for Andre Drummond, and any other topics we want to address.
Let's get this one out of the way. On March 3rd, the Cavaliers gave up a tough loss to the visiting Indiana Pacers. The team turned the ball over a grand total of 25 times. Yes, you heard that correctly. Ultimately, that was their kryptonite. Indiana was able to score 35 points off of those turnovers. The final score was 114 to 111, and yet they scored only 17 points in the fourth quarter. So now the team sits at 14 wins and 22 losses going into the All-Star break. Oh yeah, and Sexton had 32 points, Allen had 17, and Dean, making the roster Wade, added 17. These games hurt infinitely more than any loss we had during our West Coast road trip. If we want to truly progress, demand more respect, and take a step forward this season, we have to close out these kind of games. Any thoughts on the only loss of this 5-game stretch?
This game was extremely frustrating to watch. As we mentioned, the turnovers were pathetic. Listening to Austin Carr, you could just hear that he was biting his lip half the time, trying not to almost yell at the player who made the turnover. TJ McConnell's, he's a nice guy. He reminds me of Dellavedova when Dellavedova was with the Cavs the first time. Nobody should pick your pocket that often. You should not be allowing a backup point guard who's got a shorter reach, is not as fast, is not as athletic as any of the starting players or backup players for the Cavs. The only other thing that I'm noticing with the last couple of games, in this game specifically, is Jetty and Prince were both back, and there just seems to be some inconsistency. I know that Stevens was hurt. I know that they lost Garland, but for whatever reason, that bench group had some kind of magic going when Prince and Jetty were not on the floor. I like both players. I think we need wings. Wings are, very helpful in the NBA. Windler needs to be on the floor a little bit more to get comfortable. I don't know if it's because he is a rookie or whatever the case is, but they went with Windler late in that game because defensively he just works a little bit better. And so I'm really curious what they do during the All-Star break and before the trade deadline with some of these wings.
Windler, I think, he's definitely been proving his worth these past 5 games, and it's going to turn up the heat on Jetty for his future with this team. He's not coming in and hitting threes, and Windler is. Windler has more utility being able to rotate to the 4. That's just going to put even more pressure on Jetty to perform. Otherwise, I think he's going to be gone in a trade package, which we'll cover more. TJ McConnell, great game. Wish he hadn't done it against us. If he can continue to do that, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. Those are the kind of nights that a team like the Cavs should go away hanging their head. They truly gave this game up by giving the ball up so much. Those kind of stat lines only should exist in video games. I was dejected by simply watching them take the lead on a team that, after watching them beat the 76ers and go on a 4-game winning streak, I'm salivating at a 5-game winning streak going into the All-Star break. What a great turn of events, and we can just go into the break with nothing but wins and with the wind at our backs. And now I think there's probably still more doubt and some reservation going through their heads, wondering, well, how did we let that one slip by? We out-rebounded them 43-27. We had 29 assists to their 27 assists. We had 62 points in the paint. They actually had 68 points in the paint. But we went into the half shooting over 60%, and we finished the game shooting 51%, and we allowed them to get over us with 56. Probably the only stat line that I would really love to highlight in a positive way is at the free throw line. The last few games, we've been knocking them down. This game, 14 of 15 from the line. You got to keep that up for sure to win the game.
In the first half, the Pacers only had 6 rebounds. The Cavs had 26 rebounds. Again, it was like somebody played 2K and then they switched controllers back and forth playing themselves. I agree with you. It would have been nice to have that 5th win, and then having the win at our sails would have been awesome. And this was really a would've, could've, should've game. This is a playoff caliber team that they were beating handedly. They should have won this game. And it was nice to see everything else was clicking. It's just the turnovers, bleh. Bleh. On March 1st, the Cavs went into Texas and got a win against the Rockets, who were entering the game with 11 straight losses. Houston was, of course, led by John Wall in the first half, who scored 23 points. Sexton, fortunately, was able to counter that productivity by scoring 21 points. This was a bit of a sloppy game for the team as they turned the ball over 19 times, which kept Houston around just way too much. Luckily for us, Sexton added another 18 points in the second, scoring a grand total of 39 points for the night. Garland and Allen both had solid games, contributing 14 and 10 points each, but this team got the ugly win because of Colin. It was nice to see that they prevailed, getting the W with the final score of 101-90. This game was ugly, as I mentioned, Adam, but sometimes you need those. Do you agree?
I mean, I need them. Win's a win,
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter how you get them. You got to finish the game with 1 point ahead of the other team. Yeah, you may be shaking your head at kind of the outcome because, man, it was a nail biter, but you're just happy to go to sleep or waking up the next morning knowing that your team finally got over that hump, especially when you lose 10 straight the way that we did. We knew going into the West Coast trip that it was going to be brutal.
Mm-hmm.
We absolutely understood that we were probably going to come home over. That doesn't mean that we needed to then continue it after. We extended that losing streak beyond those tough stretches of games, and we missed opportunities along the way. And that's all it really takes to find yourself in a 10, 15, 20 game slide.
Yeah.
I'm just happy to see that the organization didn't take that opportunity to say, well, it's a shorter season this year.
Mm-hmm.
We've had a lot of injuries. We're not sure what we're doing with some of other pieces. Maybe we tank. Maybe we go for another decent pick. You never know what an organization's mentality is moving forward, if they're done building in that way or not. I think they should be, but that was very refreshing that they didn't say, hey, maybe this isn't our season. That they said, no, it is our season, and darn it, we're going to get healthy. We're going to go out there. We're going to prove it. We're going to get back to the winning ways that we were showing at the beginning of the season. So 101-90 win. Looking at the stat lines, it made me say, well, we underperformed everywhere else. So I'm very thankful that Colin had a great night. In a game like that, when you see your star guard and Colin Sexton score 39 points, what a great game to see him have. And that's probably what I took away from the game the most that pleased me, that it was like, okay, finally, he's starting to shake the cobwebs off after the injury. He's getting a little more confident, taking a little more diverse shots again on the court, and not just, running down the middle and throwing up a layup at top speed. And he's also dishing the ball. The guy almost had a double-double with 8 assists. So if I had to point out a negative that really crushed me for the game, it was that 17-point second quarter.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to see our professional, capable, talented, young organization, this young team, go out there and not score at least 23, 25 points a quarter. Come on, guys. You should be averaging close to 100 points a night. In today's modern NBA, teams are throwing up 130, 140 easily. So I don't want to see the Cavs play that kind of game, but I do want to see the Cavs at least average into the hundreds most nights. You're not going to get that with a 17-point quarter.
I agree with you. Sexton kind of being the bell cow. Yes, he has the speed. He has all these amazing attributes when you look at him as a player, but he seemed to be getting to his spots with his shot a lot better. Like he was dictating where he wanted to make the basket. And he did that throughout the game, I thought, the most consistently of any of the players. Dean Wade, I think watching him, he's a good, solid basketball player. Obviously, starting him is risky by Bickerstaff, but he's getting results. And I think one of the things that I like the most about him, he provides a little bit of size at the power forward position, and he hits the three. They struggled from three in this game. The Rockets did as well. And I think that Wade is a little bit of that safety valve where he's not a Kyle Korver, he's not a Daniel Gibson back in those days. But if he can be a guy who hits close to 42% from three, and even if he's only shooting it 5 times a game, that helps the offense so much. It's that, he's the press button, when everything is going to garbage, that emergency number that you want. The only nitpick that I kind of had was that I thought that Okoro could have been a little bit more productive offensively in this game. He had probably his best game. We're going to be talking about it against Philly as a professional basketball player. I mean, he was great in that game. And I just think offensively, he's just still trying to find his rhythms. And it's good to see him trying. I'm just thankful. I'm so glad that they picked him, because even when he is having an off night offensively, he still can help lock down players defensively, and he's still contributing on that end at such a high level. I know that we even question at times if he should even be starting, and he kind of came out of that West Coast trip and has been proving every night that even if he's off a little bit on his shot, he still is able to lock down players and get steals and blocks and really help set the tone on defense.
I just have to mention that we didn't talk up Wade too much in the Pacers game, but that was also a bright side of the game. To see him go 6 of 9, 5 of 8 from 3, 17 points. He got 31 minutes out there on the court, and you're just noticing every night he gets a little more. He's another player that is going to put Jetty in the hot seat, because there's just only so many minutes on the court. And right now, I think the Cavs understand that they're a team lacking consistency from 3. And if Jetty can't come in and hit that shot, then you got to find somebody else to do it. And right now, I'd rather have Dean Wade out there taking that shot. Our beloved Cavs went into Philadelphia on February 27th to face off against the East's top team, the 76ers. Now, this is a team led by monsters of men and well-deserved all-stars Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons, who had 42 and 24 points apiece. Turns out, none of that mattered, because these are the games the Cavs come out to play. Sexton led the way with 16 points in the first half alone, and they had a 9-point lead heading into the third. Of course, that's when the Sixers gained ground, having an incredibly strong quarter, outscoring Cleveland by 7. Thankfully, we fought back and forced overtime. From there, we were all witnesses to Darius Garland waking up, finally, and scoring 11, securing the win for the Cavaliers. It was a rough game for him, but he pulled it out. He had a total of 25, with Sexton piling on an additional 28. Allen and Okoro both added 14 and 15 points respectively. This is the kind of win that the Cavs organization envisioned when bringing in Allen to team up with this young, dynamic backcourt. Colin, do you think this is the signature win so far for Cleveland this year?
They came out and just stepped on the 76ers' throat, and yes, the 76ers came back, but the fact that the Cavs pulled it out was just incredible. We mentioned earlier, Okoro, this was his best game as a professional basketball player, and that's saying a lot because he is a really talented player, and I think he's going to have a really strong career. But I thought he came out and ran into the paint, wasn't scared of the moment, was able to get layups with contact, just did so many excellent things. Allen playing against Joel Embiid, anybody playing against Embiid is a difficult task, but I thought that Allen was able to stick with Embiid in the sense of being savvy about how to play against them. He had a little bit of ups and downs, but he was able to get some gamesmanship in there. It was kind of nice to see the bigs battle. It was also nice to see the bigs battle and the Cavs win, right? this was a game where seeing this new lineup was really beneficial to the Cavs. We've mentioned Wade a few times already, but I think having an actual power forward start instead of having Prince or Jetty play power forward really benefited the Cavs. What I mean is there's this whole movement to go to positionless basketball. Everybody's 6'7" and can play point guard. And in this instance, the Cavs aren't built this way. They have a point guard and a shooting guard who are both 6'1", and so we need size. I think this lineup, having Wade be a starter, really helps solidify the team, mainly because he is an actual power forward, unlike Prince and Jetty. Additionally, because of that size, he was able to get 12 total rebounds against the 76ers. The 76ers are a big team. They're not a small team. I mean, their starting point guard is 6'10". So Wade having that actual position of a power forward, I think really helps gel the team.
It was a surprising win. And it was absolutely one of those wins that we talk about we have to start getting in order to take that next step and become a serious team in this league. It's an amazing accomplishment always to be one of the bottom teams in the league, at least in standing and all the things we've been struggling with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you come in on the road into a team's house that they have the best record in the league right now in the Eastern Conference, and you beat them. That's a real ego booster and something that you need. Now, we also need to beat teams that are supposedly matched with us too, but that's another thing. But, winning a game like this, eking it out in OT, finding a way to play smart basketball down the stretch. They once again had a really poor second half, scoring 16 in the third and 20 in the fourth. They had no business being in OT. They should have easily closed it out before that. But that doesn't matter, right? The thing that matters most is they were able to coalesce, come back together, and win the game. Darius Garland having 25 points to end the game, that's a little less impressive when you know that he got 11 of it in that extra quarter, especially when you know that he went 9 of 24 in the game. Yes, the guy can shoot it from anywhere, but that statement doesn't mean much if it's bricking off the iron or he's airballing it or it's chunking off the glass. Like, we all can do that. I'd like to see Darius Garland just find a way to be a little more efficient out on the court, take a little less shots that he's not comfortable with. I keep seeing a lot of him and Sexton, but especially him in these last few games. They kick it out to him at the three-point line. He's got an open shot, and he pump fakes, holds the ball for too long. The defense collapses, and now he drives. Take that shot. I'm sick and tired of watching them give up open threes, especially when you're talking about their backcourt. That's part of your role, to stretch the defense and to expand the court. Otherwise, if you're constantly just doing everything underneath, whether you're doing a layup or some type of alley-oop dunk or some feed underneath to one of your bigs, it gets stale. So that's my biggest complaint of, yes, it was a great game to see them win, but Darius Garland, I want to see you score 25 points when you're, getting 12 of 25. And when you don't have to get half of your points in the last 5 minutes of the game. Still, great job turning it on and getting 11 points to close it out. Gotta also say that you're spot on again with Wade. Wade, 12 rebounds. Come on. Like, that's a wonderful stat. I was shocked to see it, but it kind of woke me up to the possibilities of this kid. I don't know what it is about him, but before, when he was on the court, he just looked undersized, and all of a sudden he looks like a 6'9" power forward out there. And I think it's how he's playing. It's just where he's positioning himself on the court and how he's getting himself in the right places at the right time. That's how you get 12 boards, right? And then I think he's been a great option with Larry Nance Jr. being out while he's rehabbing his fractured hand. Beyond that, the final shining star of the game has to be Jarrett Allen. You got to keep pointing out he is a double-double machine. 14 and 10, 15 and 10 is starting to be his average for this team. So it's been fun.
Yeah, and one last note, we brought him up earlier in the rundown, but Sexton, I think, Adam and I have kind of been wondering how much his ankle getting tweaked early in the season have kind of been dealing with him. This was another game on this winning stretch where I think that you're seeing that his health is, if he's not 100% recovered, he's like 99%. He took the ball into the paint against Embiid at times and was able to finish at the rim with a layup a few times. And I think that seeing him do that, you're kind of realizing, okay, he's dictating his spots a little bit. And I think that some of that is like having your legs under you.
You're right. It was wonderful to see Okoro have such an amazing game. This is what I think you and I have believed this kid is capable of since coming into the league, watching his game tape in college. He's got a lot of promise, a lot of ability. And you and I are far more patient about kind of waiting for him to find his offensive game because that's not what he was brought in for right now. We're not supposed to need him that way right now. But due to Drummond sitting and Love out and Nance Jr. out and other circumstances, it's nice to get the points. It's nice to see him out there contributing in that way. Plus, with 8 boards, almost had a double-double.
On February 24th, the John Wall-led Houston Rockets visited Cleveland and proved to be tough opponents, leading by 2 points at halftime. The Cavs thankfully responded, scoring 64 points in the second half. Jared Allen was a beast among men, scoring 64 points and making 90% of his baskets. Sexton added another 23. Dylan Windler hit all 4 of his three-point attempts, finishing with 13 off the bench. This dude hit 9 straight threes over 2 games. Thank you, basketball gods. This was one of the Cavs' more convincing wins in a while, winning 112-96. They finally didn't play down to their opponent and handled their business. They stayed aggressive and were able to counter a lot of Houston's isolation basketball with good passes and timely rebounding. Adam, this was such a solid win. What was your favorite part?
Well, my favorite part was finally playing a team with a really bad losing streak because it's wonderful to have it be on the other side. We convincingly beat a team that is struggling right now. It was great to see all 5 starters score double digits. I thought that Jared Allen coming out and getting 26 and 18, it's another reason why the Cavs and the team overall should have felt fine with Drummond sitting. Now, I don't know why he still hasn't been traded. That's another thing, but Allen proved that he really shouldn't be spending time on the bench. He should be out there as a starter. And these types of games show that off. You also have to love 90% efficiency. Come on, 90% of your baskets. You score that way in this league, you're definitely going to be turning heads. 26 points a night is easy when everything's falling. And I loved seeing Dylan Windler yet again find his stroke. 9 straight threes over 2 games. This is the type of shooting that the Cavs have been missing, that we've been begging from Jetty, that we've been hoping that we'd find from anyone else on the team. Didn't really expect it to be Windler or somebody like Wade, but if those guys can step up and meet that challenge, then great. It's nice to know we already have the pieces we need. They've just been on the bench. And I've got to give it to Bickerstaff. I think he's been showing lately that he's been a little more creative with his minutes and bringing in guys that I think you and I have been hoping to see more out there, especially Stevens.
Yeah, for sure.
Dotson, and now Wade and Windler. That's using your whole bench and finding, the team to play with rather than, oh, here's my 5 great guys and we're going to lean on them for 40 minutes a night and hope that that's enough.
This was a fun game to watch because it was a game they should have won, like from the tip, and they just played really well and were able to counter everything the Rockets were doing and really just took the bull by the horns and got the W. And that's been so rare this season. I liked too that, you brought up Allen. Allen obviously was one of the tallest players on the floor. We also have McGee, another, he's a 7-footer, and they actually used that well, unlike what happened against the Warriors. The Warriors are a more organized team. They're a little more cohesive. They obviously have Steph Curry, who's redonkulous, but at the same time, they used their height in a better way to actually execute better plays. They seem to have an idea of how to use Allen and McGee appropriately to take advantage of their height. You brought him up already. I got to bring up Windler again. Hitting 9 threes over 2 games and not missing one. I thought Windler would do better at hitting the 3 and kind of progress. I didn't see this coming from him at all. And I think that if he can keep up his confidence and kind of learn from creating a little bit more space around the 3-point arc to get that shot off, he'll continue to be a go-to guy off the bench to say like, all right, Windler, we need 12 points here in this quarter. Just hit 4 threes in a row, right? Which is what we need when people are kind of closing in on our guards who like to kind of go into the paint a little bit more to stretch out the defense. So it was a lot of fun to see the Cavs take advantage of their matchups in this game, which has just been so rare in this season.
The Cavaliers hosted the Atlanta Hawks the night of February 23rd. The team, led by the extremely talented Trae Young, are playoff hopefuls, but Cleveland was in dire need of a win, having just lost a whopping 10 in a row. Lucky for us, they got exactly that when Colin Sexton passed the ball to rookie Lamar Stevens, who slammed home a rim-rattling, earth-shattering, season-saving dunk. The Cavs were able to come out with a win, 112-111, due to their defensive grit and clutch three-point shooting. Sexton led the team with 29 points, Garland added a much-needed 17, and the big surprise, Dylan Windler added 15 off the bench, going 5 for 5 from beyond the arc. Just wow! The bench as a unit scored 40 points and ultimately secured the win. This was such an exciting win, especially since they started making some of the changes we've been talking about and have been desperately wanting to see. So you know what this means, right? We need to become GMs. Kobe Altman, call us. We have ideas. What do you think, Colin?
You and I have been talking the Cavs for so long. We've been paying attention to playing styles in the NBA and how this team executes in this fashion or that fashion. You and I were texting back and forth about how everything that we brought up in previous podcasts kind of was a culmination of how they excelled in this game. Only attempting 28 threes, but hitting 15 of them, shooting over 50% from three. You brought up that point, I want to say 17,000 times just in 4 podcasts. If we're going to not attempt over 30, we better be hitting them at a high clip, right? That's exactly what they did. We brought up Dean Wade a bunch in this podcast. We did not call that. I would say we weren't like, oh, put Dean Wade on in the starting lineup. Just do that now, JB, and everything will be solved. We didn't say that, but JB might have heard us and said, oh, more threes, right? Because Wade is known to stretch the defense because he is a solid three-point shooter. The last thing I just want to always see is Trae Young not getting his way ever. I think that Okoro containing him to, 9 of 27 from the field. Okoro is not getting a lot of light shown on him outside of Cleveland for his defensive capabilities and what, there have been sports reporters and writers who have said that Okoro should be benched the rest of the season and that the Cavs are going to regret this draft pick the rest of this run with these young players. And it's like the way people talk about Trae Young, they already think that he is almost as good as Steph Curry, like a 1A, 1B, the way you would hear some of these media personalities talk about him. And Okoro locked him down. He had 3 blocks on this dude, and he didn't foul out of the game because we know half of Young's mannerisms. He's half James Harden, half Steph Curry, which just turns into a dude who randomly falls left and right and stops and starts, and dudes just foul him right away because that's not how anybody dribbles and moves in a basketball game. That's what Young always does, right? It's like, oh, let me just stand here real quick and I'm going to move real quick in a weird way that dudes are like, okay, cool, I fouled you.
Trae Young, I've been impressed with, usually from highlights. I very rarely see a full game of his. In this game, I wasn't that impressed, and mostly because of what Okoro was able to do. The 28 points that he got on the stat line makes it seem like he had a good game against us, but, the fact that he left a lot out on the court just goes to show he was trying to put up 40 or 50. So you can live with 28, especially when you were able to hold the rest of the team to relatively their stat line and you won the game. All joking aside, because that's what it was, leading into this. We're not clairvoyant or anything, but we do watch a lot of Cavs basketball, and we would like to see more experimentation, more chances to truly see what you have, allow the bench to play, allow everybody to get out there. especially when you're dealing with injuries and you're having problems with keeping a solid rotation every night. Maybe that's been the best blessing of this season, is that a lot of experimentation has been required. And it was almost during that 10-game stretch where we lost all those games, I felt like they kind of ran out of ideas of what to do. And then when Drummond was permanently benched or put in plain clothes, and they moved on to their Allen identity and they started playing a little differently, I think they've been allowed now to bring in these guys and to try different sets and to see what works, and it's paying off. We could never have thought that Wade would come in and be that efficient on the offensive side, because it didn't seem like he had that kind of game waiting to shine. Maybe he'll fall back to earth here soon. I think I see a guy out there that actually has a pretty solid shot, and it has a little bit of a cocky kind of confidence to his game. Especially, I love to see a guy when he's playing for a contract to stay on the team for the rest of the season. He comes out there and has a career night. The game before they have to make a decision, hey man, you've earned every chance that you're being given. So good for you. And speaking of that, it's also wonderful to see a rookie in Stevens, somebody that what college did he play for? Who are we talking about here?
Penn State.
Right, but most people, is my point, most people don't know anything about this guy. It's continuing the streak that the Cavs have had in the last couple of seasons, where they're proving to not be a team that cannot draft unless it's just like an obvious choice. So Stevens, I love the fact that he was the guy that took that shot. I don't know, I almost felt like in that moment it was an opportunity seen and he took it. I didn't feel like the play was drawn up that way. It was more like they came up the court, Sexton passed it over to Stevens, to kind of just maybe set a pick or some type of rotation over in the corner, but he caught it in stride and continued moving towards the basket. And as he saw the lane was wide open and nobody anticipated that he would go there, he had killer veteran instincts to just head to the bucket and slam it home. And how many times have we seen guys two-hand slam and it just goes way up into the rafters and out of bounds?
Mm. Yeah.
So he could have choked in that moment. He didn't. He finished it out strong. It disoriented the Hawks so much that they couldn't get reset back down the court. They couldn't even get a shot up before the buzzer.
Yeah. And I think, too, there was some reporting about how Bickerstaff kind of gave the team the heads up that if Atlanta had the possession and they missed the shot, that they weren't going to call a timeout, that Bickerstaff didn't want to call a timeout. He had put Stevens on the floor defensively just because he's been a revelation having Stevens and Okoro. I think that Stevens is obviously the bigger surprise because he was undrafted. I give so much credit to Bickerstaff to, just like what you're saying, this is a moment where it's not that he ran out of ideas here. He's forced to use the experimentation. And I agree with you. I think that Stevens obviously wasn't drawn up. And I think Stevens just took the opportunity. Apparently, I saw a couple things on Twitter where people had said that that's what Stevens does in practice all the time. He's constantly dunking the ball.
Let's go to the tape.
We all know Andre Drummond has played his last game as a Cavalier. This isn't a huge surprise, but it's still a bit of a bummer. He seemed less motivated the longer he played with Allen on the team, and the offense seemed to stall out at times with him on the court. From a team angle, hopefully he is traded. What type of player would you want in return?
Well, you and I have talked at length about needing a point guard. It's kind of sad because I was certain that we didn't need one starting the season. I was always concerned about Dante Exum, which he's the backup point guard we started the season with. For those of you that don't remember, he was part of the multi-team Nets trade that got us Jared Allen and Prince. Granted, Exum, for context even further, I know he's been hurt ever since, so it's not like we would have really gotten anything out of that. In hindsight, bringing in Dellavedova turned out to be a mistake. They felt that they needed to bring somebody back that would get the crowd to be excited again to come see the team. But in some ways, I wonder whose decision that was. That almost doesn't feel like a Kobe Altman decision. It almost feels like a Dan Gilbert decision. Not saying that Gilbert did make the decision. It's just more of it almost feels like a marketing decision and not so much what was best for the Cavs. And so what I want to see in Drummond going is a good basketball decision, bringing in a point guard that isn't about fan expectation or even selling tickets. I don't think we need that. I think what should be the focus of the Cavs organization from Drummond's trade should ultimately be about fitting those final pieces into place to becoming the team that they envision with the starting five that they've been able to put together. You and I haven't talked about this that much, but I would like to see Taurean Prince be the starting small forward more often, especially when Nance comes back, and we could possibly have him be the starting power forward if we move Love, unless we keep Love. In some ways, I think what we've asked of Okoro has been too much, and going into the second half of the season, I'd like to see him come off the bench more. You can still start him in certain games, but I like Prince's length and his ability to play the 3 or the 4. He can rotate out on the court very easily doing that. He can even move the 2 a little bit because he's got some mid-range and outside game. And let Okoro now learn from the bench a little bit more. Come in with the second unit a little bit more. Ask him to score a little bit more. And in that way, I think you can move Jetty. That was my long way around to say that Drummond, I think, not only do we move him to get these final pieces, but it's also about who we move with him.
Right.
To round out kind of the inconsistencies that, frankly, we just can't live with anymore. And Jetty has become an inconsistency for the role that they envisioned him to play. So I think it would be important to move Jetty with Drummond if possible.
I mean, I think that's all valid. I think the backup point guard is essential for this team. You brought up really good points with, Exum and Dellavedova. Garland and Sexton both need a backup point guard. You can tell that they're tired. They're going to be playing even more games more frequently in the second half of the season. If they're able to get even a veteran point guard that's played even for 3 or 4 seasons that can help solidify the bench, who isn't injury prone, would be great. Somebody that can pass and shoot the 3 and kind of understand what an offense is supposed to do. Doesn't even have to be that great of a defender, as long as he kind of moves the ball and gets the second unit going. I think your point about Prince could be really interesting. I wouldn't be surprised if teams were interested in Prince, but if we can hold on to Prince and Jetty, there's nostalgia there with him, but I completely agree with you. I don't think he's played his way like off of a NBA team, but his ability to be inconsistent is maddening. And I think as well, you bring up like a really good wrinkle, right? Where if Okoro moves to the bench and you have Stevens also on the bench, and either Love or Nance, or, depending on how the rotations are moving, you're kind of having these wings and Stevens and Okoro kind of needing to kind of develop their offensive game a little bit, but it's against reserves. It's against the second unit, right? I think Okoro is a much better passer and dribbler than he's kind of shown so far at the beginning of the season. And some of it's been nerves, but also he's tired. I'm not saying he's wearing down. I don't think he's wearing down in any capacity, but he's having to guard LeBron, Kawhi, Giannis, like every night. Those are just the upper echelon dudes. He's having to be the best defender every night, which wears you out offensively, right?
Yeah, more minutes in the professional game and more wear and tear because of, like you've said, who he's matched up with against every night. These are grown men, right? They are, you and I know as we get older, like there's a massive difference between a 19-year-old or a 20-year-old and 36-year-old LeBron James. The fact that 19-year-old Okoro went out there and actually, guarded him for most of the game and did it fairly well and has done that against most of these stars. He has proven his worth, but now I wonder what's the best place for him moving into the second half of the season. It doesn't matter anymore if you're a starter in this league.
Yeah.
Yes, the prestige matters, and these guys absolutely want to be starters, but the money isn't as crazy different anymore, and even the minutes aren't all that different. They're all averaging about 34 to 23 minutes a game. Pretty respectable. You get out there, and especially for, again, he's a rookie. We're really thinking of him almost like a second or third season guy just because of the play that he's had this season on defense.
I think too, ideally, to kind of move into like the hopefulness of a possible potential Drummond trade of what we would get out of it, is if we're able to get that backup point guard, mess with the rotations a little bit where Okoro is coming off the bench and Nance is healthy the rest of the season, or Love is. That could also mean that Dean Wade is moved back into the second unit along with Okoro. Yes, those are both young guys, but it would be really great to see the speed, the power, the tenacity with Okoro, and then the shooting touch and rebounding with Wade, what he has shown just in that 5-game stretch. I think that Okoro could start picking up some assist numbers. Really, the way that he gets to the basket and his physicality could work really well with a veteran presence of a backup. And with Wade, that would be ideal, is having that solidified the rest of the season. Garland comes out, we have this gentleman come in, play some solid minutes, and then you're able to kind of get the rotation back to what it was at the beginning of the season. I remember Austin Carr made the point at the beginning of the season where he said our second unit is just as good as first team's units a lot of times. And that's dropped off, obviously, because of injury, right?
Yeah, we've been playing our second and third unit in our starting five. So
yeah. And that's what happens. And Bickerstaff has taken that in stride. He's coached his tail off. But at the same time, if we're able to kind of move back to that a little bit, that would be ideal. And that starts with a solid Drummond trade. Even getting one person in the backcourt, I think, is the best option. Is there anyone else that we're thinking of that you think might get traded? I mean, McGee could be a guy that some teams might knock on the door for. Like I said, Jetty, I think people might fight for, but I think people might trade for Prince too. Would you want to keep both of those guys? Would you expect that they would be gone?
Well, obviously, because I envision him being more in the starting rotation, I want to keep Taurean Prince. If we're going to move somebody besides Jetty, I would look to... Kevin Love is clearly the next guy up. I don't think we can move Love and Drummond in the same process, so that's not going to happen. Yeah, it's a lot of money, and there's no team that I think is interested in footing that bill.
Yeah.
The money's gotten crazy in the NBA, so
yeah,
never say never. But I don't think that's going to happen. So Love, in some ways, I feel like we're going to have to keep him for the rest of the year, just due to the nature of his contract and the fact that he hasn't been healthy enough for any team to really want to invest in him right now. I think he's got to come back and play a solid second half of the season before we can move him.
That's true.
That may not happen either, but sad but true, I think JaVale McGee is the odd man out and should probably be moved. Larry Nance Jr. is the future of the either starting power forward position for the Cavs, or he's going to at least be solid coming off of the bench at that position. And he's also a little undersized, so you could put him in the small forward position too. Larry's going to have a hard time continuing to keep a roster position with the Cavs if they continue to get unbelievable play out of people like Windler and Wade. Because these guys have more length, they're a little taller, they're a little more athletic. I'm very impressed with Wade. Some of these guys, in some ways, their stock has risen because of the way they've played over the last 5 or 6 games, and that could get them moved as well. And also their contracts are small and their salaries won't mean much. But I think the Cavs right now, the organization seems to be indicating that a lot of those pieces, the ones they've picked through the draft and that, they don't really want to move them. So I think it would be McGee because he was picked up in free agency, and actually Damian Dotson.
Oh, good point.
I think it's possible that we would move him because I think his stock has risen because of the play that he's put out on the court this season, and he's a movable option because of his contract. So
Love is I think he kind of has to show the rest of the NBA world that he has the legs to run a team and be kind of the go-to guy. And I don't know if he would necessarily be the go-to guy when he comes back onto the court, but my expectation of Love, if he's going to start, he needs to at least be 15 and 10 a night. And that's a solid power forward. But I kind of agree with you. I think JaVale has been really spirited for the team. I think a lot of the players have talked about how he has added actually some professionalism and some just energy to the team and the bench. But at the same time, he was picked up this offseason through a trade for a second round pick. he would be the odd man out, like you pointed out. And I think he's a 7-footer still, right? And there are a ton of teams who would probably covet that. And so, yeah, we could be looking at a whole new center position, especially with the backup center position or rotation, depending how the trade deadline goes or just in the next few weeks or days. With the Dotson stuff, I think I would love if they kept Dotson. You brought up a great point with Wade and with Windler. And I think if we did ideally get a backup point guard to help Garland, Dotson's not needed as much. Ideally, I think you and I agree that it would be a backup point guard. That would be the best thing that they bring in the Drummond scenario. So would you be disappointed if they just had to ultimately do a buyout with Drummond?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not, it shouldn't even be, it really shouldn't, it shouldn't even be an option for the Cavs. They should absolutely move him for players and picks, or I would rather see them just get picks, honestly, than just see them get bought out.
Yeah.
Being a Cavs fan and going through the last 15, 20 years of following what the organization has kind of made a rule, they often will do 3, 4, 5 team trades.
Yeah.
And they'll move 4, 5, 6, 7 players all at once.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even when they're already competitive and they're a playoff bound team, they'll do that.
Yeah.
I think anything's possible. We could, all 4 players that I mentioned could easily be gone by the trade deadline because they're savvy enough as an organization, have always proven to be so, that they can, not so much in other ways, but this is one of their best assets, is that they can find ways to get multiple teams to go in on what they want. And that's, well, they got Jared Allen and Taurean Prince. So they've already proven it this year that they're still good at it.
Your point is extremely valid and I think makes absolute sense. Is they've already proven once this season that they're able to kind of be like, hey, we can be trade partners over here in Cleveland.
We'll just steal your best stuff, but yeah,
right. We'll Robin Hood you, not the app. They've already proven with the Allen and Prince trade that they're able to help with 4-team trades. And you're right. They've always been adept at figuring out the money and the partnerships to kind of get a deal done. That's why I am hopeful that they'll be able to at least get picks before a buyout scenario with Drummond.
The final seconds.
Rounding out today's podcast, here are a few things we wanted to quickly highlight. The Cavs are heading into the All-Star break with a little confidence after cobbling together an impressive string of wins. Yes, they lost the game heading into the break, and we'll get to that, but it was great to see winning basketball for the Wine and Gold again. How do you feel the first part of the season is gone?
I wish the Cavs had a bit of a better record, but at the same time, I think they have kind of rebounded in the sense of the Cavs are finishing on a little bit of a higher note than I thought they would be. I wish that they didn't have a 10-game losing streak. I'm hopeful that they'll be able to kind of move forward with some of these recent wins and some of the lineup changes. I feel like JB is trusting his players more. Who or what has been your most positive thing of the season so far? It can be their jerseys, the coaching staff, a certain player, or a recent win. What is the most positive thing?
Well, we talked jerseys before, so I'm not going to bring it up now. Everybody knows how I feel. I would say the most positive thing for me this season so far has been the organization's ability to finally kind of get out of their own way. I'm happy to see that they have a plan. They're executing that plan. The first thing out of my mouth I wanted to say was Jared Allen was the most positive thing for the season for me so far. But really, it's the fact that the organization had the ability to go and get him. That just gives me a lot of hope. We came into the year, it was so wonderful to see team basketball again. They were really playing without ego. It was fun to see that kind of basketball. That probably would have been what I leaned on, but because of our injuries and other issues that we've run into throughout the season, I can't say that. So I would say it's got to be the organization and how they were able to snag Allen and bring in Prince with that deal. And ultimately, I'm excited to see what they're going to do next, which we've talked about today. The Cavs had lost 10 straight games before going 4-1 in their last 5. Their record at the halfway point is 14-22. They showed grit, determination, and resolve to shake off their bad losing streak. Working as a team, they went out there and played great basketball. They're still struggling at times to get the ball in the basket, but hey, progress. What are you hoping to see improved upon coming into the second half of the season?
Well, Adam, I don't know if you've seen a basketball court lately, but they have this arc that's kind of behind the foul line and kind of further back, where if you stand behind it, you get 3 points if you make a basket behind that arc. I would love for the Cavs to make more three-pointers, shoot more three-pointers, and hit closer to 40% as a team. That'll help their offense. It'll help open up so much of the style of play for Sexton and Garland. It'll help Jared Allen. It'll just be a great through line on improving the overall offense. I want them to take more three-pointers and make more three-pointers at a consistent rate the whole second half of the season. A surprise bright spot for their win streak was Dean Wade. We love that guy. Who are some of your favorite Dean Wade type of players the Cavs have had in the past?
So Channing Frye comes to mind because I didn't know too much of his game before he came to the Cavs. He was just such a breath of fresh air. I mean, in 2017, he shot almost 50% from the field. And yeah, he only averaged about 5 points a game for us, but those were big points. He often would hit some huge corner three. He had nice length for defense and getting rebounds underneath and blocking shots. Channing Frye was a real pleasure to watch on the court and a real fundamental first basketball player. You know, a guy that just, if you love the game, you got to love his game. You need those types of players out on the court to complement your superstars and to give the team a well-rounded feel. That's what the Cavs have been searching for very much this season. So it's great when you discover that certain guys on your team can fulfill roles that you hadn't yet envisioned that they could do. And again, 5-6 points here and there, that's a ball game. You can win a game or lose a game based on that. I've always respected those guys that can come in and give me that consistently. It was a pleasure this week. I look forward to the Cavs coming back soon, and I hope their newfound ways of winning games returns with them after some much-needed rest.
Thanks, as always, for listening. Please follow us on Spotify and Apple, and catch you all next week.
Thank you for listening to the Cavaliers Basketball Club podcast. Let's go Cavs!